Having planned out research design with the research objectives and the variables, it is now time to collect data. And this presentation is about data. So we are now ready to collect data about a variety of situations that are taken under the study under social sciences. It could be about individuals, it could be about groups of individuals, groups of people, it could be about places, it could be about situation, a variety of it could be about the crops that have been harvested, it could be the number of vehicles that have been manufactured, or the number of small scale units that have been shut down. Any of these cases, or girl child who have dropped out of school. There are a variety of situations in society that a social scientist encounters and that they plan to study. So depending upon the study, the social scientist, the researcher would decide how and what kind of data to be used. So secondary data is usually the information is already available, and only that needs to be collected and then extracted, in the sense that we have to spend time on learning how to extract the data and use that data. And this data is usually collected by agencies, uh, and some of them are available free and some have to be paid for. So this collected data is actually also been subjected to some statistical analysis by the collecting agency. Now, who are the major agencies which collect data? Government, of course. So secondary data collection by the government, various ministries of the government at the international level, at the national level, at the state level, and at the local level. So at international level, it could be about trade, it could be about different kinds of cultural exchanges, it could be about political relationship between nations, a whole lot of information that is collected at the international level. At the national level, the various ministries that we have, art and culture and information and broadcasting, or it could be from the agriculture, it could be the labor, the environment, industries, series of ministries we have, and all these ministries collect data at the national level. Similar information is also collected at the state level, and then these information of more specific to the local area is collected at the local level. So we have a Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation, and then the Central Statistical Organization. So the data that arrives from this body is the National Sample Survey, National Sample Survey, or it's called as the NSSO. NSSO is a major source of data for all researchers in social sciences. There is also the Statistical Abstract of India, the National Family Health Survey, which could give data on health, medical, nutrition and diets, and so on and so forth. So there could be a variety of issues that a social scientist looks for, and there are that many data points that are available also by the secondary source. The Reserve Bank is another important source of data relating to economic studies, and it has got its reports which are annual, half yearly, monthly, bi-monthly, weekly, sometimes occasionally. So there are different kinds of data that the Reserve Bank of India also collects, and these are available for any researcher. There are also publications by trade and business houses to capture the growth of small scale industries or entrepreneurship, or looking for the manufacturing, or many of these kind of data that are related to industry and trade houses are collected by these kind of agencies. Then there are research institutes and universities which also do research, and they would have collected data. Those data is also available in their libraries and in the thesis that would have been submitted to the universities, or research projects that have been submitted. We also find journals, newspapers, annual reports, articles, various bodies, variety of bodies. Whoever needs to study something have to collect data. Sometimes it is collected by them and could be made use of by the researcher. There are also international bodies that could be collecting data and making this data available, like the World Bank, the IMF, or the WTO, or the Food and Agriculture Organizations, or the various banks that are there. All of these also collect data from different parts of the world, and they are compiled and are made available to researchers. The only consideration that one needs to make when one uses data collected by agencies then is what consideration did they keep in mind when they collected the data? What was the sample? What was the method that was used to collect the data? Usually, NSSO and such kind of data are just accepted, whereas data that has been collected by trade bodies or by individuals, that those kind of secondary data, when they're used, they need to be more carefully examined before they are being used. So when secondary data is collected, the researcher will learn skills of handling large data and extracting data from that, and then learning to analyze. This is an important skill that you will learn, because all later in your research life you will require to use the skills that you are learning to do it now. Primary data is the second form of data where the researcher is directly involved in collecting the data, and it is original, it is first hand, it is raw, and it is authentic to the study that you're making, because it is current and it is relevant. For example, if we want to now know the number of girl students who have dropped out of the school system because of COVID, there is no other way to get that data except that going to the field and conducting a primary survey. So there are situations like this, there are many topics like this which for which secondary data may not be available, and also to get more information, more insights into that social science issue, it is necessary to collect primary data. Of course, it involves additional time, and it is also costly because one has to move around to collect that data. Also, you require additional skills which are interpersonal nature, which we will require to collect primary data. I would think that we need to keep in mind what should be the place from where the data is going to be collected, what would be the time required to collect the data, how many respondents are expected to be covered by this study, then what will be the sampling method that will be used, which will be the method. There are so many methods of collecting primary data. Which of those methods will be used to collect data? And then of course planning how to be analyzing data and the logistic details of fixing up the interviews and so on. There are several instruments that are available for data collection, and these data collection methods should be carefully guided by the variables that have been identified during the process of literature review and your so that is very important here. So what we need to do is we need to construct the research instrument first, the data collection instrument first, and then we need to try that instrument. After that, we need to make corrections, whatever is required in that instrument, then go ahead for the final collection of data. One of the method that is used by social scientists is that of observation method, where we observe how people are conducting themselves in given situations. So the researcher has to go to the field and be either carry out a structured observation or an unstructured observation. In structured observation, there are very particularly points that needs to be noted, and we observe only those kind of things. Unobserved structured unstructured observation could be like how in general people might behave in out of, if you want to see how people spend time in a park, how do they spend their time, what do they do during their time in the park, or things like that, where you are just observing something, not necessarily that you have structure that this is what you should do. Whereas if you wanted to go to a retail store, you may look for very structured observation where you exactly want to know how many times a person has picked up an item there and check the price, and how many times how many minutes were taken to have taken a decision, and so on. There could be participant observation, or there could be non-participant. In the case of participant observation, you become one of the participant in that group and then try and observe how other members in the group are actually working. And then you could also have non-participant, where you're just outside of that group. You could also have controlled and uncontrolled. Uncontrolled observation is the one that we just shared, but controlled observations are usually the one that is called also experiments, which is conducted in subjects like psychology and behavioral economics. Now, one of the very important method that we know is that of an interview. So interview method is interesting and time consuming, but at the same time very insightful to carry out interview methods. Now, it's an artificial situation. First of all, it is artificial because the interviewer and interviewee do not experience these things in a day-to-day life, and therefore an arrangement has to be made where we could meet the interviewee, what kind of an arrangement is that going to be, and so on. So suppose we need to find some data about traveling, then we could conduct that interview at the railway station. We could conduct that at the airport. You want to have very random kind of an interview about people, about some issue that is interesting to you or under your study. You could meet them at bus stops or places, wherever. So in such cases, we have to arrange, we have to keep in mind, we have to be very clear where are we going to conduct these interviews, and what kind of arrangement will be available for us to meet individuals and talk to them. So we could have structured interviews where we talk to the respondent in a manner that it is guided by the questions that we have in mind, and there is a rigid pattern under which this interview will happen. So these interviews, when we conduct interviews, we get insights into the subject that we are planning to study. You could also have unstructured interview where we have not determined what is expected of it, except that the broad theme is available, but the finer details may not be necessarily written, in which case we have much more flexibility to conduct such kind of interviews. And so here, to conduct interviews with strangers, the interviewer's skills come in very of prime importance. So we need to have tact, we need to have good communication skills, and we need to build trust so that we are able to converse with the person, and the person is willing to share whatever information we are seeking. Generally, the non-response rates are very low because we are directly talking to them, and they usually respond to such interviews. It's also possible that when we conduct interviews, we get supplementary information. More information than what was expected is quite possible that we get during these kind of interviews. However, time required is more to conduct such interviews, and the quality of the interviewer can limit the quality of the data that is collected by the interviewer. So if an interviewer wants to record the interview, then the permission of that interviewee must be taken before it is recorded. So let me talk about questionnaires. Questionnaires are written questions mailed or given to respondents. In this particular case, what happens is the researcher gets this questionnaire ready and can meet people and ask them to fill it and give it to the researcher, or it can be canvassed across groups of people through different ways. Maybe somebody gets some set of questionnaires answered, collected for on behalf of you. So that's also done by some. Now, what is the important thing in a questionnaire? The respondents are expected to read the question, and of course, it is meant for the educated people who can understand the language that you have written. So the respondents reads the questions. and answers the questions on the space given in the questionnaire. So there is no social interaction in this particular kind of method of data collection, and you cannot explain the question to the respondent, and in real time you can't explain to them, and this questionnaire is inflexible because whatever mistakes will be there will carry on with all the questionnaires until we are careful about the data that has been collected. We have seen many times that students come to collect data, they leave questionnaires and then they say we will come and collect it back. They don't collect it back, or they give a bunch of questionnaires and say please spread it around to others to fill it up. Now I would say that it is here that your dedication to work is important. At this point it is important that you personally go give the hand out the questionnaires and give a time to them so that you could go and collect these questionnaires back from the respondents. So the questionnaire should have introduction to the questionnaire, and the flow of questions must be smooth. It should be logically arranged so that the respondent need not ask a question or need not think about answering it. And the physical appearance of the questionnaire also matters, so that there's enough spacing and it is aligned properly and the layout appears to be interesting for a respondent to answer. Too long a questionnaire, usually people do not complete it. So it's good to identify the important variables and the kind of answers that are expected. Questions can be open-ended or closed, in which case open-ended means there can be comments that can come, and closed would be a yes or no kind of an answer. So it should be arranged in a logical sequence with the words that are just right for a layperson to answer, and the language should be simple and adequate space must be available for writing the answers. There is another way wherein the respondent does not answer the questionnaire in writing. The researcher himself or herself will have the questionnaire and talk to the respondent, collect the data and write it on their own. So the researcher is the person who writes down the answers, not the respondent. So that is where when we have a schedule. Now this schedule is the purpose is we don't lose much time. We don't have the no response is very low because we are directly meeting individuals and we can collect the data. So that gives a more it takes a lesser time than the other one to questionnaire to spread out and come back. This can be done rather easily. But however, the quality of this kind of questionnaire will depend upon the competence of the enumerator also, whether the enumerator or the researcher is able to make the respondent, identified responder, respond to the questions that you want to ask. I would suggest that for a PhD scholar or for a PG student, it is important to learn to develop a questionnaire, canvas that questionnaire, and also conduct a scheduled interview at using these things, because after this time you will not really do this work again. So once PhD is over, you rarely get back to doing going to the field and talking to people to collect primary data. You may go there to understand this scenario and then you will have enumerators to collect the data, but it is important at this stage to learn how to collect data, learn how to talk to strangers, learn how to collect answers, and learn get involved in that activity of collecting data. This is something very important for a researcher to learn. So both the secondary data teaches one kind of skill and the primary data teaches another kind of skill, and both the skills are important for a researcher at later stage in your own career. And there are it is important that you also learn how to conduct the research within the given time, the questionnaire schedule within the given time, and with the kind of questions you have, nothing should be missed out from the thing. I have also found that it was difficult to collect data on age, on income, and these kind of data are usually difficult for a first-hand researcher to find out. But in course of time, I discovered that those questions I would push those questions to the end, so that after I have collected all the necessary information, I would just by the way, I would learn to ask these kind of questions. So there are different techniques. Each of us have developed our own ways of asking that. It is also important that we schedule these interviews well, the time, and we reach there on time and collect the data that is required. So these are the some of the insights that we get through this, but some new insight may also emerge during these kind of studies. A case study method is another interesting method of collecting data, and case study methods again allows you to understand a social scenario much better than the questionnaire method. You will be talking to people or to groups of people in a more intense way. You will collect data on a variety of issues than just one set of things, and it can be a free flow, or with a guided theme it could be a free flow, and you will learn a lot of things. I remember during my own research on the garment manufacturing, I wanted to see the women in the garment manufacturing sector. So I had taken 2 or 3 case studies there, and I had understood these women and their work habits, and why they leave companies and so on in detail, because these could not be captured fully by the schedule. So in these kind of cases, when you want to know the stories behind individuals working in firms or in places, these kind of methods can be useful. The other method, of course, is the focus group discussion. Of course, focus group discussion is when we have a select group of people who are brought in for the discussion, and we could talk to them in an elaborate manner on areas that we would want to be interested in, and then we get the insights from them. So my understanding is that we need to be sensitive to people whom we talk to, and also gender-wise, we need to be sensitive to people when we talk on issues that can be helpful, on the language that we need to talk to people, and the time that we need to take about of people to answer the questions that we have in mind. All of these put together develops in us a good set of social skills which are necessary to carry out research as you go by. And that is how we can combine the primary data and secondary data in one research. So having a chapter on secondary data but one unit on primary data, I would suggest, is a good idea, because this will be possibly the only time when you will go to collect the data as a researcher, and later you may have enumerators to collect the data for you. So I hope the session has been useful to you. Of course, this is just a very limited ideas that I have shared. There are lots of ideas on research. I'm sure that you have already started collecting those information, and you have started proceeding your research. Thank you.